Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. Most people actually do not. There's a lot of talk about revolution and all this stuff, but most people don't really understand. They misunderstand what revolution is. When they think about revolution, they think about an armed uprising and so forth and so on. They also think that, you know, this comes from the absolute bottom up, which is actually not true. Historically, most revolutions have not happened from the bottom up. The people at the bottom, the poorest people, have the fewest resources. If you're talking about shutting down industries and so forth and so on, then now you can have strikes that are limited in scale and scope, but that's not a revolution. That is not a revolution. The fact is that historically, most revolutions have not come from the bottom. Yeah, you can starve out the people at the bottom. Yeah, you take away their pay, take away their access to food, take away, all of their resources, and you starve out the people at the bottom pretty easily. Historically, the people that have been the leaders in revolutions have been the petty bourgeoisie, the upper middle class, the small business owners, the ones that feel like they have been overtaxed and had their rights taken away and so forth and so on. So the poor get dragged into a revolution. And generally willingly, but it starts actually from the middle, not from the bottom. When you talk about an armed and violent overthrow, you're talking about an insurrection or a revolt. Let me go to a couple of definitions here. All right. Insurrection, an organized and usually violent act of revolt or rebellion against an established government or governing authority of a nation state or other political entity by a group of its citizens or subjects. Also, any act of engaging in such a revolt. An insurrection may facilitate or bring about a revolution, which is a radical change in the form of government or political system of a state. And it may be initiated or provoked by an act of sedition, which is an incitement to revolt or rebellion. In the United States, insurrection against the authority of the federal government is a crime. All right, I'm not going to go further into that. But let's go to the definition of revolution. Revolution, a sudden, radical, or complete change. A fundamental change in political organization, especially the overthrow or renunciation of one government or ruler and the substitution of another by the governed. Activity or movement designed to effect fundamental changes in the socio-economic situation. A fundamental change in the way of thinking about or visualizing something. A change of paradigm. So pay attention to that last part. A change of paradigm. That is what revolution is all about. You can have an armed overthrow, an insurrection, and just replace it with a duplicate system. Revolution does not mean separate the two. We've had revolutions in this country, the civil rights movement, the suffrage. These were revolutions. They were a change of paradigm. They were a change in the socioeconomic organization and a shift of power within to make our society more fair. These were revolutions, whether we deem them as such or not. They truly were revolutionary. When you talk about revolution, you're talking about a certain cohesive concept, a paradigm, an organization, and revolution is more, in spite of what our academics have been trying to do, which is to limit revolution to an academic concept in books and so forth. They're not the very people like Noam Chomsky may talk about changes that need to take place, but then when you talk about actually making those changes, such as the institution and rise of third parties, these same people will tell you it's not time for that. It's not time for action. Let's just keep talking about it. A revolution is not about talking, although you have to propagate the concepts it's a change of mindset. It's not, you can have the insurrection, but the insurrection has to lead to revolutionary change. While insurrection, revolt, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, and revolution can and generally do happen concurrently, they are not the same thing. So, a revolution does not have to be violent. Generally, if you look at suffrage and the civil rights movement, violence occurred, but the violence began not by the people that were pushing for the change. It came from the establishment, which was pushing against those changes. So violence may occur, and generally does. So you can take a revolution and turn it into an insurrection, a revolt, a rebellion, an armed overthrow. And also don't confuse, an insurrection with a coup, which is generally a military overthrow of a government. That's completely different. And the people don't have any control over that. The one president, U.S. president, that really understood revolution was John F. Kennedy, and I have referred back to this quote many times. He said, "Those that make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable." I think I got something on my shoulder. So he made that distinction, that revolution does not have to be violent. If you separate insurrection from revolution, an insurrection is most likely to be unsuccessful, at least in the short term. Not because of a lack of force, but because a lack of cohesion, a lack of definition of the purpose of this. And when we look back at the French Revolution, this was actually an insurrection, a rebellion. It did not happen in a matter of days or weeks. It actually went on for about 80 years with many changes in their government because they did not have a clear vision of what they were trying to achieve. Instances of rebellion which can lead to revolution are things like a general strike, which can be revolutionary if it has stated goals. If you just have a general strike for the sake of a general strike, then it's not going to result in any systemic change. You have to state what your demands are, what changes you want to bring about. I've brought up the subject. Many people want higher wages, which is, a valid complaint, but it's insufficient because you increase wages, then capitalist entities are just going to raise prices. We've been chasing our tails on that for many decades. And the real issue is purchasing power. The dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power in the last century, with most of that happening in the last 40 years since Reagan. What the real goal should be stabilizing and improving purchasing power. So you can have a general strike for the purpose of improving wages, but if you're not also fighting for things like price controls, limits on corporate profits, etc., then you're really not achieving anything. We definitely need a revolution in this country, but it needs to be defined, and that is the problem, is that we're not defining what changes we need to implement adequately. We need far more clarity in what we want to happen. And there's so much infighting, especially in the left, and all these wedges driven between us, between the right and the left, who really want mostly the same things: better wages, more secure personal security, etc. But we're not going to achieve that by fighting with each other. And as long as we listen to the mainstream media, certain interests that have disparate goals, which are very selfish, and when you look into it, most of them have a profit motive of their own, then you're going to be divided. You're going to be confused. You're not going to have the idea of what kind of systemic changes you want. So if we want systemic change, it has to be cohesive. It needs to be holistic. We need to look at things from a much wider perspective than we have been doing. When we listen to certain voices, it is meant to keep you confused and to make you feel powerless. But we, the workers of this country, are not powerless. We are the most powerful force in world history. Well, except for the Chinese, who, they're a lot more cohesive in what they want and supportive of their government. Over 90% of their population supports their government, but that's a discussion for a different time. Here in this country, we want change. And if we want these changes, there is no choice anymore. We can't make piecemeal one change at a time, because for every change you make, there is a counterbalancing a change which makes whatever changes you have made nullified, or even make you take away more power than you have achieved. So if we want to make changes, if we want a revolution, which we do need, then we need to get together and talk about what actual changes have to occur. Better, more access to health care that we can afford without going bankrupt. Ending homelessness, ending hunger, putting price caps on goods, putting limits on corporate profits, improving wages and purchasing power. These are the things that we need to be fighting for, along with racial and gender equity. But if we achieve some of these other things, we improve racial and gender equity and so forth. Those things get improved with these other changes. This is a class issue. It should not be separated out into race and gender, and those are distractions from the reality that we need. So, if we talk about revolution, let's be clear about what kind of revolution we're talking about. There is no such thing as a revolution for the sake of revolution. Just changing the government doesn't mean that we'll have the government that we want. There will be different interests, different ideologies that are fighting for supremacy within a revolution. So if we're not unified on what we're trying to do, then any revolution would be just doomed to failure. Anyway, I hope this kind of clarifies things, but revolution, insurrection, those are different things. Revolution does not have to be violent, but a revolution has to be clearly defined in its goals. Share this video. Talk about these subjects. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this channel and my presidential campaign, and I will catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a good day.